Hi, Ron. I'm here today with Jim Davidson. He's the director of Fyneside Developments. Hi, Jim.
Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well. You?
Yes, very good. Actually, I've just been out for a walk, so I'm a wee bit sort of wet on the head, I guess. It's a wee bit drizzly here.
Cleared your head. That's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah. At
Yeah,
least I've
this
still
time of
got
year,
some of hair.
yeah, this time of year is good for clearing your head with the fresh
Yeah,
air. That's
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
properly fresh. Um, so Jim, if you could just tell me a bit about the business you're in now, and or the businesses you're in now, and what you offer your customers, that'd be good start.
Yeah, sure. My main business started about 20 years ago in 2003 is Fyneside Developments. We are what's called a ground up property development company. So what that essentially means is that we build new build houses as opposed to maybe taking over an existing building and renovating it, as a lot of people who call themselves property developers are. So we're essentially a property developer. What we do is we source land. We source this off-market land. Land that traditionally is on sale is far too expensive, so we have to source it. We negotiate with the existing landowner. We then put in place all the different permissions that's required. In the UK, permission for building land is actually quite a tricky process, and therefore there's quite a considerable uplift in value that happens once we get permission. So that's one of our profit centers. The second one is actually when we build out the site itself, and that's an additional profit center. About 3 years ago, I was filming one of our developments, and I started a YouTube channel. This was just prior to the sort of like early days of the pandemic. In fact, in 2020 it was. Now it's almost 4 years ago, I guess. That generated some inquiries, people saying, oh, actually, how do you do this? So therefore I started a training company, and that fulfilled one of my lifetime passions. Unlike most people, I actually like being in front of an audience. I actually enjoy that speaking process. I was a member of Toastmasters for 20 years, so I kind of honed my skills. I have spoken, the largest audience I've spoken in front of is 3,000 people. I actually find smaller audiences more terrifying to speak in front of than larger ones. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do, and I basically help people become property developers on the training side, and we build fairly nice homes for residential clients.
All right. Thanks, Jim. No, I appreciate that. People listening might be wondering, this is obviously a podcast aimed at people who are interested in franchising in one form or another, and we're going to get onto that because there's a link here with Jim and his background and past with franchising. So we'll come onto that in a bit. But in terms of property development side of things, how long have you been involved in that? So you mentioned, was that 20 years?
Yeah, I've kind of always had an interest in property, right from a very early age. I was actually at school when I purchased my first property with my brother back in 1973. We purchased a flat or an apartment, depending on where you're viewing from, what you call it, in the student district of Edinburgh. That property we bought for 7,500. 4 years later, I bought my brother out of it, and it was worth 14,000. And by the time I sold it 2 years later, it was worth 21,000. So that kind of caught my interest. Very good capital appreciation. Of course, it was the 1970s, hyperinflation, in fact. So that sort of spurred it, but it always gave me an interest in property. It was very difficult to get into doing property in the way that I do it today at that stage, and so therefore it wasn't necessarily an option. I had a fairly successful 10-year career in retail, and I left the position as assistant general manager of a store employing about 320 of a staff to set up my own business. And I established in 1983 a small, well, in fact, I took a shop over and we grew that to a chain of four convenience stores and a petrol station or gas station. Yeah.
Okay. And as far as franchising is concerned, Jim, and you've lived in the US and in Florida, I saw, and obviously you've been back and now you're back here. And what what's been your experience in franchising in that time? Because you've obviously started businesses and you've done various things. Where has franchising fallen in your thinking in over all these years? And yeah, how have you
Yeah,
how have you come across it and viewed it?
yeah. I mean, I guess my earliest thought in terms of franchising was actually when I had the convenience stores, because we looked at a number of franchises, and in fact, you mentioned I went to Florida, and I actually came down to a decision. I was looking at a franchise, which was a printing franchise at that time, and one of these sort of quick print places. And I also had the opportunity to move to Florida. And I live in the UK. The weather is not particularly great, and it was always like, I thought, a dream of mine. I actually want to live in a better climate. And so I was torn between the two. Which do I do? Do I go? So I was ready. I had decided that I was coming out of the convenience store businesses. I pretty much sold them all by that time. But during that process, I'd been looking at franchising, and then I had been looking at Florida as well as an opportunity. And Florida is the one that ultimately won. I ended up there. So I had an early inkling into what franchising was, and investigated several franchises. I'd had meetings with master franchisors during that period of time. But my real experience, I guess, with franchising didn't come till I came back from Florida, and came back. I'd had several businesses in Florida. Came back in 2000. My mother at that time was ailing, and sadly she passed away within about 5 weeks of us returning. But I decided that I was going to settle back into Scotland, where I currently live. And I was then looking, okay, what am I going to do now? I was far too young to retire, and I don't even now I'm past retirement age. I don't want to retire, so that tells you something. So I looked at different opportunities, and I came across this franchise that I was interested in. And again, I was looking at several franchising opportunities then, and this was a dry cleaning franchise. And what was actually being offered to me was a concept that had been created in Germany. This guy who had a dry cleaning equipment manufacturing business had previously, 20 years prior to that, set up a franchise, had sold it out, and was now looking to create a new franchise. And this new franchise, as I say, was based on a German model. He had bought rights to do this from the German company, and I was offered the master franchise rights for the whole of Scotland. Now, at that time, there was no business, there was no units, I should say, or no franchisees within Scotland. So the idea was that I would set up some units, and then I would bring in some additional franchisees, and obviously I would share in the franchise fee profits, and that would come out of that. But also I would be responsible for looking after them. So that kind of gives you an idea of how where my interest is, and I'm quite happy to talk about my experience from there if you like.
Yeah, I suppose, Jim, were you planning to become a master franchisee, as it were, or did that just did it happen? Were you looking for it, or did it kind of find you
No, I
somewhere?
think it found me, in as much as that I was interested initially in the franchise as a franchisee, and it was then proposed to me that I might become the master franchisor for because what they were looking to do was to carve the UK up into certain regions, and Scotland was quite a tidy region for that to happen. So I was offered that opportunity to actually take on that particular master franchisor.
Okay, yeah, and I think, yeah, we've seen this a lot. I mean, it's a very common expansion model for brands to seek out a partner at a master franchise level to take on the responsibilities for a country or a larger region within a geographic area, and then get involved in the development of that area, typically through finding franchisees and supporting them. The biggest problem we've found is that when people invest in a master franchise, the structure, whilst it might be quite good in the home country where the franchise was grown originally, obviously in the UK, Scotland, it's a totally different environment, and it hasn't been tested, and therefore you cannot just take a template that's worked there and put it here. So what was your experience of that? What did you believe you were investing in terms of time and money, and where did that differ in terms of actually what you saw or what you got?
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting observation from yourself, because the tried and tested model was definitely in Germany. The concept was brought, as we say, to the UK, and it was really at that time in its infancy, of only being tested in two locations around London, and and apart from that, I don't think it actually worked there ultimately when I look back at it, and it certainly didn't work in my situation. I think the initial sort of thought process at the time was, and this is something that we have to be aware of. Opportunities come our way, and we can either be very early to the deal, or we can be late to the deal. And there's so many times I've been late to the deal. And so being late to the deal means that you don't necessarily, if it's a franchise, you don't necessarily get the best locations. Whereas if you're early to the deal, you get the pick of the best locations. So usually the larger cities are the better locations, depending what the franchise is. And not only that, is that particularly as being offered a master franchise, here was an opportunity to be very much in the ground floor, and ultimately I saw myself probably being included as a director of the parent company, because I would be an important element and help them grow. So there was definitely a very exciting opportunity there. I wouldn't like to say I was naive, because at that stage, I had been, had experience of business for coming on for almost 20 years. So 18 years to be exact. So it wasn't like I was naive to business or naive to that. I thought I properly checked it out. I did a lot of investigation. I did a lot of my own market research. I had accountants pour over it. And everything seemed to be good. The concept seemed to be good, and where it really it was fairly apparent right from the beginning. Once we opened the first unit, the setting up of the unit was fine. Everything that was great, which makes sense, because that was their business. Their core business was equipment and setting up units. So they were very good at that. We got a good location. There was no doubt about that. But what really lacked was the marketing of the business. They didn't have a clue how to market the business. And the problem is that when you're investigating, well, this was my experience in investigating the franchise. One of the things is that they are going to protect their marketing material. So you're going to be told that the marketing's all there, but you're not really going to be given necessarily a lot of insight into the marketing, because that's obviously part of their intellectual property. And so therefore, had I been able to see what the marketing material was, which was non-existent actually in this case, then I would have, I would have definitely looked at it very, very differently. So I was very much left to come up with my own marketing plan, which I did, and we managed to get a certain turnover going through, but we lost a lot of initial groundwork. And particularly when you open a business, and you've suddenly got all this overhead coming through, and you've got zero income coming in, as it was. In fact, it was day 2 before we actually got our first customer come through the door. So you've got this huge overhead, and it really took, by the time it dawned on me that what they had said would work wouldn't work, which took me about a month, because I expected it would to start growing, and we had certain marketing that was going out, and we're waiting for that to work. And then actually putting in a new marketing plan, probably was about 2 months. Suddenly we had a period of 2 months where we had very, very little income in, and then trying to recover from that was extremely difficult. Now, fortunately, I had good cash reserves, and so therefore I was able to survive that. And then as we went on, there was just completely there was a breakdown between me and the master franchisor. I was, I was obviously very concerned, and in fact, I had to get a legal team involved in it, because they were demanding payments, and I was saying, you haven't provided. I'm not paying you. Because what you have provided is purely just equip the shop. In other words, you've made a profit out of it, and actually you've charged me far more for the materials than you really should have either as well. So actually you owe me money. So I actually then tried to sue them to get money, because they had really it was a bad experience. Ultimately, I decided to take the painful decision to close the business. And it's the first time I've ever actually closed a business. And it was a dilemma of, where is this going to go? And one of the reasons that we closed it was because a very successful national competitor was going to be opening a drive-through dry clean business 100 yards down from our road. I believe we could have actually rescued the business, but with that potential competition coming in, I felt that it was a wee bit difficult for people to park outside our store. So I believe that was just, it wasn't worth making the further investment to try and rescue the business. So I decided to shut the doors.
Yeah, no, Jim, it's interesting hearing you talk, because that was that was 20 years ago, right?
Yes. So this was
Just
2001, 2002. It was kind of strange because we all talk about 9/11, and you know exactly where you are. And I remember exactly where I was standing at that time, and the store had only been open 6 days at that time. And yes, it was 22 years, 23 years ago now again. September 3rd is when we opened. So yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So I mean, that's about the time I started to get into franchising properly. And what's you won't know this, but I do, because I've been in franchising ever since. Is the same problems, the same problem that you've just described there. It reoccurs all the time,
Does
where
it really?
you get, yeah, it does, and you get people investing in a master franchise, and then they're let down by the structure, and often it's the marketing side, because if there's no marketing plan, or if the franchise, if the original franchise brand cannot actually give a certain template in a different country to that owner, to that master franchisee, then you're actually asking that new master franchisee to create their own marketing plan. Well, that's like starting your very own business from scratch.
Yes.
And if you start your own business, you'll know this because you've done it a few times. It takes a while to get the marketing plan correct. You have to tweak it, you make mistakes, you waste money, you try things, you do it again. All the time, time is bleeding away. That's exactly what happened with you there. And it's really not your fault. And this continues to happen. It's the most frustrating thing I see in franchising. It doesn't only happen at that high level, at a master level. It happens at these, at a much lower level, at a single unit level, just a van-based franchise or a single location franchise. It happens all the time. And so many of the problems stem from the fact that there's just not a good marketing out the box plan, and that's provided. And it's just crazy to me. And so I think for anyone listening that is at that level of investment, looking to invest sometimes up to £500,000 to get the country rights from master, between 100,000 and 500,000 typically. Be very careful and be very diligent. And 20 years ago, 21 years ago, you didn't have the internet like you have now, of course, to do your research. So research is much more, in a way, much more easy. But you still can't uncover everything. And so to me, I believe that you have to, if you don't feel if anyone looking at franchising at any level doesn't feel there's transparency there and yes, you've got to sign NDAs, confidentiality agreements, all that kind of stuff. We are, I understand brands have to protect themselves, but then it comes down to gut feel a little bit. And if you don't feel you get the answers you need, then there's other opportunities out there, and probably it's best to walk away. Because but lots of people don't. If you buy into a concept, and it seems the right timing, and you want to be the first in there, and you're believing what you're told without being able to be shown it, because as you say, there was some protection there, Jim, from an IP perspective. I'm sure that brands can lean on. It just leads to failure, and it's a real shame because there, there's probably some small things that could have been done that could have changed that whole experience. And 20 years on, who knows? You might have a huge chain of dry cleaning outlets that you might have sold, and the franchisor would have been really, really happy. So what would you do differently, Jim? Yeah.
Yes, well, yes. So, so first of all, yeah, I suppose the difference is there's two things you mentioned: gut feeling, and there was a period actually where I had a bit of a gut instinct, and it was before we actually completely went ahead with it. We were raising finance for equipment, and I'd asked for a particular report from them, and the report was flimsy to what I expected. I expected something a bit better than that. So but I ignored my gut, and normally I don't, but I did in this instance. So that was definitely the one thing about it. I think one of the things that they actually did, because as I said, they actually had franchisees before, and I had, during this period of time, I'd actually got quite close to one of the directors with the company, and I probably trusted him too much. I'd been bought into his trust, and there was one store that he had opened that was near where I was going to be located. There wasn't going to be any competition. It wasn't that near. But he already told me about a story and a problem that he'd had with this particular person. And so therefore, there's a technique that they use, and network marketers use this technique. It's interesting. And what they say is that they remove the negative. I can't remember, they have a term for it, but in other words, somebody is saying, oh, they're all excited. They go to a network marketing thing, and they're all excited, and they're going to sign up. And then they go home and somebody says, oh, no, you don't want to do this because of boom, boom, boom. So what they do is they say, look, yeah, you're really excited. Now, when you go home, your partner is going to say this, this, and this to you. So when they go home, their partner says, yes, this, this, and this. And they say, yeah, well, I knew they were going to say that. So I'm fine. I can go ahead. So he did that sort of technique. He's saying, look, you can go and speak to this guy, but this is what he's going to tell you, blah, 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 blah. And I'll give you the background to it. And it all seemed very reasonable. So I think there's a cautionary tale in that respect, is that if somebody's telling you a story, be cautious about what they're really telling you, and is that really true? Now, ultimately, one of the things that I found, and this is maybe not quite so relevant, but I actually found when I got into the industry and I started speaking to different suppliers, which I hadn't done up until that time because I didn't even know who they were. There was one particular equipment manufacturer, or one equipment supplier, who actually took the equipment when I decided to close the business out, and took it out. And he said, yeah, he says, I kind of like, I was a bit kind of sorry because I had an obligation to this guy because we supply equipment for him, but I knew his history, and I could see where this was going. So I guess is maybe try and, if it's in an industry, try and speak to other people in the industry to see if there's any history of that. And what this guy told me, which was really quite alarming, was that one of the directors, and I don't know which one it was, had actually gone to jail for fraud. So,
Right.
there was evidence out there. I think the problem was trying to find that evidence. And of course, as you rightly said, the internet was in its infancy in those days. You probably couldn't have found it. We were definitely only in dial-up at that stage.
Yeah.
So finding that information, and it wasn't even, people didn't even think about going on to the internet to find information. They really looked on it. Yeah, yeah. I can't even think what we looked at in those days. I think it
Yeah.
was more for email. I think we signed on to
Yeah.
AOL and we got
Yeah.
email, and you got mail, and that was about the sum of it, you know. So so there weren't the research tools. Definitely research, and just try and get into the industry that you're looking to get into. That people who know what they're doing, speak to suppliers, speak to. So because even though I sought like accountants' advice, listers' advice, or that, they didn't understand the industry. They didn't have any experience of the industry. They wouldn't have been in the know. They're very good at giving you the general knowledge that you need for, you know, looking at the numbers and looking at the legalities of it, but they don't have that sort of insight. So I would say get into that industry and find out people who are in that industry. Go and speak to competitors. You know, yes, obviously you might be ending up being their competitor, but you'll glean some information from them as well. You know, they'll probably try and talk you out of it, but you know, maybe for good reason they might try and talk you out of it.
Yeah. And also make sure that there's a good marketing plan backing up.
Oh,
In
100%. And
yeah.
yes, sorry, I was going to touch on that because it's what you were saying is absolutely right. The marketing is 100% key. And had I not known that there wasn't going to be any marketing, I would have sorted the marketing out before I opened the doors.
Yeah.
And so so that is absolutely key, and definitely when you start a business, you have to figure, you know, if you're starting on your own, you do have to figure out the marketing. So as we talked about earlier, you know, I've started a training business. I'm still figuring out the market. I've been doing this for 2 or 3 years. I'm still figuring out the marketing of that business. It's completely, you know, although I understand marketing for one type of business, marketing is different for different types of businesses, and I'm still trying to understand the marketing for that business. So yes, absolutely. The marketing is absolutely key, and I actually wonder if they're really, and you maybe know the answer to this. You know, if you are looking at a franchise, is can they not give you some idea of the marketing? I just think the fact that they're saying no, we can't give you any of this. Surely with a non-disclosure agreement, they can at least give you some idea of what the marketing in terms of campaigns that are available.
Yeah, Jim, these days I think I think pre-internet and everything, there was a lot more people were a lot more guarded against giving away IP and being worried about telling people too much about a business in case competitors got in there or people set up their own business or all that kind of stuff. I think these days there is much more transparency. We see it everywhere. You know, we see it in people's profiles on LinkedIn and what they say about themselves personally. It's way more, you know, people aren't afraid of saying what things are, or people knowing certain things, and I think companies are becoming the same. You know, it's not a fear anymore that you're giving away information. It's if you don't give that information away, then you're not gonna attract the right people. And so it's definitely changed, and you do definitely these days get much more detail on marketing, but you will be required to sign, you know, NDAs and confidentiality agreements for sure. And typically, that kind of level of detail about marketing plans and things will come after you've paid a deposit as well. So whatever level, and that's normally a reasonable size deposit, depending on as a percentage of the overall fee. And at that point, the franchisor should feel pretty comfortable and should share that information. And if they don't, then I would certainly say is probably walk away. You know, have an ultimatum and walk away at that point, because it's okay if a franchisor says we don't have a marketing plan for the UK. If they're a German company, that's okay, as long as you know that, as you say,
Yes.
as long as you know that up front and you have experience in marketing. It's a negotiation point. Maybe you can negotiate on the fee a bit more. Maybe you can understand there's more risk, and therefore, okay, we can negotiate on the upfront fee maybe, or whatever, or the fee structure. But but to be told there is a plan and not to be shown it, and for the and for brands to hide behind confidentiality and things, I think that's very wrong. I wouldn't touch any
Mm,
investment
mm.
in franchising that kind of
And
that
one of the
like
things
that
that I would
in.
say, because you did ask me, I think when you look at something and you invest a lot of time in looking into an opportunity and you get so far down the road, you kind of feel so invested in it, it becomes more difficult to walk away. And I think the piece of advice I would offer there is uh, I understand it's very difficult because that was kind of the situation I was in, and I was thinking, well, if I don't do this? What am I going to do now? And I've invested so much time and effort into it, and some expenditure, obviously, as well. But I think you then have to just focus for a little while on what would happen if it completely went wrong. What position would you be in then? And how dire could that be? Because ultimately you could lose everything, and you know losing that time invested and maybe whatever funds that you put in at that stage, would that be worth losing when if it meant that ultimately you might lose everything? So I think you have to be very real with yourself on that, and that's very difficult because it's an emotional thing,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
we're driven by our emotions.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's how everything is sold these days.
Yeah.
You only have to turn on the telly and watch any advert. I mean, one out of every two is trying to tap into your emotional kind of intelligence
Yes.
with the way and franchising is no different. The stories you hear, and it's all very emotional, and you buy into it. You're right, and the more you buy into it, the more you kind of trust, and then the more you trust, the less you ask, the less you want to ask, and then you go down a bad path sometimes. So, I think you're right. You have to sometimes be a bit more black and white about things, and try and remove the emotion, which can be difficult because we're all human,
Very
right?
tough.
So
Yeah.
that's difficult. So Jim, on a final point, what I wanted to ask is, you've got your own successful business now, and nothing to do with franchising. But have you been put off franchising? How do you view franchising in light of maybe, obviously a negative experience, but how do you look at franchising in the UK right now?
No, I'm not against franchising. I guess there's two ways that I would look at that. One is if I was going to be a franchisee or a master, a franchisee, I guess, is I tend to be my own, I tend to like to do what I want to do, and obviously franchising by nature has certain restrictions. Naturally, they need to protect their brand, they need to protect their methodology. So I'm I don't know entirely if I would be a great franchisee. In terms of franchising, so one of the things have considered is at some point was perhaps taking the training business and turning that into a franchise. The problem that I guess for me, at my age, I kind of felt I don't know if I really want to put that amount of effort into it, because what I do understand about franchising is that it's very much, there's a huge, if you're going to be good at it and you're going to service your franchisees properly, there's an awful lot of work that goes into it. Yeah, and to set it up properly, to have all the systems and the support system. So there's a huge front end that you need to provide the franchisee in order to get them to become successful. Obviously, once they become successful, that becomes that much easier on the franchisor. But the franchisor does need to, if they're going to be good at it, then they've got to provide a massive amount of support and all the training and everything that goes into that. Because basically you're giving that person is a business in the box, and you want to be dedicating yourself to ensure that they're successful. I don't know that so I understand what would need to be done, and I wouldn't do it half-heartedly. So
Yeah.
for me, I'm not put off either way of the franchising model. I think if it's good, then I think it's a good model. I also think that good businesses actually, who are not franchises, are should adopt the franchise model. So, you know, Michael Gerber, who produced the book, the E-Myth, bases how to structure a business on the franchise model. And you know, a successful business will have adopted a franchise model, even if they're not a franchise themselves. So no, I'm very positive about it. But there are a lot of sharks out there. There's no doubt about that.
No, I think, Jim, I think that you make two really absolutely brilliant points to end off on there. One, you're right. If you're too entrepreneurial, franchising really isn't for you. I mean, I can say that. And so if you're someone that's started lots of businesses and moved around like you have, you're not. It's going to be hard to find a fit within a franchise, you know, within a franchise brand, because you will become the biggest pain in their you know what.
Yes, absolutely.
And that won't be good. On the other side, you're absolutely right. Franchising is a journey, and if you have a successful business and you're thinking about franchising that business, it's a medium to long term journey. It's not, you know, it's not a quick turnaround and a quick build and sell or whatever you're thinking. You gotta be looking at it minimum 5 years, absolute minimum, but more likely 10 to 15, maybe 20. And your commitment really is to people, and because you're supporting other human beings who are giving up a lot, who are risking a lot to invest in your business, and they're relying on you to help them grow, you know, their smaller part of that business as a franchisee. And it's a very difficult journey to go on if you're not prepared for it. And so I think those are really two excellent points. And you know, Jim, it's good to hear that you still talk positively about franchising. And of course, if you come across anyone interested in franchising in any way, you know, please send them my way. I'll have a very honest chat with them and give them the information they need. And but Jim, no, thanks so much for your time today, and it's been really interesting talking about your past dalliances with franchising.
Thank you. No, I've enjoyed our chat. It's been good having to revisit some pains, but they're now thankfully way in the past.
And good luck with your business. It sounds great. I think I might buy your book. It looks really interesting. So
okay,
all right,
cool. Yeah.
All right, Jim.
Wants
Have a good
subscribe to my
evening.
channel, they're welcome to do so.
Oh yeah. Tell us. So where is that? Tell
So
people where they
there's
can
a
find
YouTube
it.
channel, and it's Build It and Prosper. So it's got its own name. So it's a smallish channel. We've only just got under 4,000 subscribers, but it's growing. So yeah,
Right.
There's almost coming on for 200 videos on there. So there's plenty of content for people to consume if that's something they're interested in.
All right. So build it and prosper.
Build It and Prosper. Yeah.
Yeah. Search for that. So
Yeah.
all right, Jim. Well, excellent. Thanks so much for your time. And yeah. We'll see you later.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Bye bye.